Hi, this is Alex Wentz, and you're listening to Open Mic for Open Primaries, a podcast about State Question 836 and the effort to bring open primaries to Oklahoma. If you're a regular listener, you're used to hearing from Margaret Kobos, who's the founder and president of Oklahoma United, a nonprofit that's helped to launch State Question 836 and the open primary effort in the state. But as the name of this podcast series states, this is an open mic, and today I have the mic along with my guest. I assume most listeners don't know who I am, so I'm going to introduce myself. Again, my name is Alex Wentz, and I do communications work for the Vote Yes 836 campaign, the effort to get SQ836, which is the constitutional amendment that would bring open primaries to Oklahoma, on the ballot and then to pass it through a vote of the people. Other than working at 836, I've worked in and around politics my whole adult life. I've worked for a Republican polling firm in Washington, D.C., and as former Congresswoman and later Governor Mary Fallon's communications director, and then at a public affairs firm here in Oklahoma City. If you follow politics closely in Oklahoma, you definitely know who my guest is. Pat McFerron is the chief strategist for Vote Yes 836. He's one of the most well-known and accomplished politicos in the state of Oklahoma and even nationally. Pat's a founding partner at CMA Strategies, a well-known and well-respected public affairs firm here in Oklahoma City. He has over 30 years of election, grassroots, and voter opinion research experience. To give you an idea of his influence and success, remember that the state of Oklahoma used to be dominated by Democrats. The switch to becoming a red state happened in the mid-90s and early aughts, and it had a lot to do with Pat McFerron. During this time period, Pat was involved either directly through the state party or through an independent expenditure in every Republican takeover in the Oklahoma State House and State Senate. Pat helped to flip more than 50 state legislative seats red, so it's not an understatement to say he was one of the architects of a political realignment in Oklahoma. Pat's also worked with multiple presidential campaigns, including that of Donald Trump, as well as more than 80 successful U.S. Senate, gubernatorial, and congressional campaigns, over 150 winning legislative races, more than a dozen statewide or major city mayor victories. In addition, he's been involved in 83 triumphant local ballot initiatives and more than 20 successful state ballot questions and constitutional amendments. And he's also a family man with 2 children who's been married to his wife for over 30 years. Pat, congratulations on all your success. I know the Vote Yes 836 campaign is lucky to have you, and we're enjoying the fruits of your labor. Thanks for being with us here today.
No, happy to, Alex. Really enjoy it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Pat, we're going to get into open primaries in a few minutes, but I just want to give our listeners some time to learn, more about you and who you are. What attracted you? You've had this long, successful career. How did it start, though? What attracted you to politics? How'd you get into it?
I think like most people, it was really sort of by accident. One, as a young guy growing up in Nowata, Oklahoma, I got engaged very early. I remember in an 8th grade social studies class going to hear our local congressman speak at a nursing home. I heard him tell people they had to vote for him to protect their Social Security, and it made me question that. I mean, how do they know who you're voting for? I realize now as an adult what he was trying to say was that if Democrats didn't have power, somehow that Social Security would go away. But I went door to door telling people I'd heard my congressman lie, that we had a secret ballot. And it got me engaged and involved. And because I did that, I had other campaigns come and ask me to pass out things at 4th of July events, to put up signs, do those things. And domestic politics kind of became a hobby of mine. Fast forward then, after I'm going to grad school, actually going to grad school to work in international development. Had done some things with World Neighbors, was planning on going overseas to help third world countries. But through some fortunate circumstances, I had what amounted to a 2-year internship in Washington, D.C. with an Oklahoma-based company, and they put me in charge of their political action committee. And through that, I became aware of that you can make a living in what was a hobby of mine in domestic politics, and realized that the international aid community was not a place that I felt really comfortable with my capitalist views. And so I decided to work in domestic politics, came back to Oklahoma, and was able to work on really the first cycle I worked a lot in was 94 with Frank Keating and J.C. Watts and Steve Largent, Tom Coburn, Frank Lucas, just a stellar year in Oklahoma when we really started to flip at the federal level, becoming Republican.
After all, your experience and your decades of wins in politics, is there something that you've learned either about campaigns or candidates or the process, how they work and operate that really surprised you or that might surprise our listeners?
Yeah, I think the first thing, especially if you look at how sometimes it's lauded or described in TV and movies and in public media, it's really about blocking and tackling. It's really about developing your message, going to the voters, talking to the voters. It really is grunt work more than anything else. There's no big, this strategist, that strategist is going to do something spectacular. It's about getting the right message in front of voters. But what's really surprising, I think, to folks is how few voters there really are. Been doing a little bit of research here on this, and it's just something we update all the time. Oklahoma is a state of about 4 million people. But if you look at the most active Republican primary voters, it's about 57,000 households. It's just not that many people. Less than 75,000 people have voted in each of the last 5 Republican primaries, and that's just dating back to the year 2020, and so it's just not that much there. The other thing I would say that it's really changed anyway that's surprising is how campaigns work. I will tell you in the 90s, and I love the term aughts, as you said earlier, it was about consensus building, bringing people together. I will say since that time, it's continued to change and devolve to where it's about divisiveness and finding your people and getting them out. And so there's less of a emphasis on building those consensus and building the coalitions.
So as a political strategist, if you're doing the math, you're saying that 20 years ago, you're looking at a voting pool and you're saying, how can we appeal to the largest number of people? How can we get 50% plus one? Now you're saying it's come to how can we hone in on like a very narrow market share and pump that up and sort of depress the rest of the turnout. As how so walk me through kind of like how that changes the process.
No, I think that's exactly true. And I mean, we'll go back. I know it seems like ancient history to some folks on here, but you look at, let's say, the 1994, 30 years ago, U.S. Senate contest. You've got Jim Inhofe, who is running against Dave McCurdy in a competitive general election. And it was about, Jim Inhofe going to Southeast Oklahoma, a place where Republicans had never won before, courting voters, bringing them on board. That's how he won. And today, instead of building people and bringing them to you, what you're trying to do is motivate the 3, 4, 5% of the people to get out and vote. Is really what the game is about today.
What's and maybe sort of thinking about these older campaigns that were more built on inclusion and building casting a wider net. But do you have a favorite campaign that you've worked on, whether that's a candidate or an issue?
That's a tough one. I mean, I've had candidates I've just loved working with and doing. I mean, Mike Pompeo was a longtime client of mine when he was a member of Congress from Kansas. We just had a very close personal relationship, so that's one I would point out to. But it's really you're kind of asking me to pick my favorite child when you talk about campaigns. Of course, everybody can do that. I'm not just kidding, Hattie and Sam. But there are some that really stand out to me. The first state question that really stands out was right to work back in 2001, where I fundamentally believed it was wrong to be forced to join a union to have a job. I think it's changed the economy of the state. Was very proud to work with Frank Keating on that effort, doing the polling and focus group research on that, where Oklahoma became the first state in more than 30 years to become a right to work state at that time and really helped change some of the national narrative on that. I am as you might be able to see, those are my season ticket boxes behind me. So the Thunder holds a special place in my heart, and so I was able to work on both the campaign to bring the Thunder to Oklahoma City and the recent Oklahoma City Arena, and have worked on more than 20 municipal issues in Oklahoma City and Central Oklahoma alone to be successful, and really, really pleased to work on those. And I think they kind of show, when you look at the leadership we've had in Oklahoma City, what a kind of a top two system, or talk to you about in a little bit, the kind of leadership that brings, where it's about doing things, about accomplishments, about moving forward, about actually doing the will of the voters instead of the segmentation we've got to now. And of course, I'd be remiss not to mention the one that I got to work with you most on, bringing beer and wine to grocery stores, and where I really enjoyed working with you to make that all happen in Oklahoma.
Yes, I would say that was one of my favorites, mostly because many of my friends don't care about politics and don't want to hear about what I do all day, but they do care about beer and wine and its availability in grocery stores. So
No, and it was fun and unique in that it was different coalitions than you normally have, and it was about building the consensus, building the coalition. Maybe that's why I like the state questions so much more than the campaigns now, the candidate campaigns, because those do tend to be, everybody gets to vote on them, and
right.
so everybody's voice matters, and we try to pull people together, or sometimes I'm on the no side, but pull people together and have an honest discussion about, is this the best thing for Oklahoma, and let everybody have an equal voice.
All right. Well, let's talk about, speaking of state questions, let's talk about the one we're working on right now, which is state question 836 and open primaries. Before we do that, I want to define a couple of terms for our audience so they know exactly what we're talking about and what we mean when we use these words. So a closed primary is what we have today. And that's one in which an organized party, like the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, the Libertarian Party, hold an election to determine their own nominee. So they're selecting, for instance, the Republican nominee for state legislature, the Democratic nominee, and they don't allow everyone else to vote in that election. So in Oklahoma, Republicans hold elections to determine the Republican nominees. Democrats and independents can't vote in those contests. Libertarians and Democrats do the same, although they've recently decided to open their contests to independent voters, but they're not guaranteed the ability to participate. That's what we are talking about when we talk about a closed partisan primary. An open primary, as proposed by State Question 836, is a contest where every candidate appears on one primary ballot. Every voter gets the same ballot and gets to vote, and the top two candidates, regardless of party, then move on to a general election. So there are different kinds of open primary systems, but that's the one being proposed by State Question 836. So for the purposes of that conversation, when Pat and I are talking about an open primary, that's what we mean. And I also want to set some expectations for our audience here. As I think is clear by now, Pat's a Republican, I'm a Republican. We're both involved in the effort to pass State Question 836, but we want Republicans, Democrats, and independents to vote for the state question. We think it has something to offer everyone, but as I said, we're Republicans, we're not hiding the ball, and we come at this from that perspective. And one of the things I want to answer on this podcast is, why should Republicans support this? Especially given that they're in a dominant position electorally. They have, clear control of the state house, the Senate, every elected statewide official, every member of Congress. So I want to tackle that question, but I want Pat to walk us through how he kind of personally came to support open primaries. So Pat, if you will, take us on that personal journey. You're a consultant who's enjoyed enormous success getting people elected in this closed primary system that we are trying to change. Why do you want to change that system, and how did you arrive at that conclusion?
There's been a lot of steps along the way, and I will tell you, I was first approached about this more than a dozen years ago and just summarily dismissed it. So I understand those Republicans that are skeptical here. I mean, that's where I was for a long time. One of the things we haven't talked about in my background as much is I do polling. That's primarily what I do. And as I review other polls and conduct my own and look at things, one of the things that really concerns me is this decline in faith in our institutions and systems. And I think that's coupled with the belief that the American dream is dying. And I think that's all stems from the hyper partisanship that our current system has done, uh, where to become the nominee and therefore because of the way lines are drawn and other things, winning the nomination of a Republican or a Democrat uh, guarantees you the seat. There's no reason to ever appeal to the full general electorate. And so I think it leads to this hyper partisanship because nobody is trying to appeal to the electorate as a whole. They're just trying to appeal to that narrow, what I call market share politics group. So that's a big piece of it. But then I reflect back. I remember I was very fortunate. My folks, I only remember them having a couple of arguments when I was growing up. And one of them had to do with our county sheriff's race that we had. I mentioned before, I grew up in Nowata County, which, when I first started voting there in 1986, I remember going in to vote and telling people I'm in the little book. I was in the thin book as the Republicans. All of our county offices were Democrat held, and including our sheriff. A friend of our families was running for sheriff, ran as a Republican in the early 80s, and lost, horribly. He changed parties to become a Democrat and was going to run as a Democrat in the primary in the future. My mom thought about switching parties to vote for him in the primary so her vote would count. And I remember my dad saying he had lots of sins to account for. Being married to a Democrat wasn't going to be one of them. And kind of into the argument a little bit there, but I just thought it was just wrong then. That why should someone have to join a party just to cast a meaningful vote? Much like on right to work, why should you have to join a union to have a job? Why should you have to join a party to cast a vote that matters? Which is the very real situation my mom was faced with. And I've always been, tried to be someone that opposes situational ethics. It was wrong when the Democrats had control to exclude Republican voices in general elections. I think it's wrong for Republicans to do the same now. So, I think if you're honest with who you are and where things are, you have to see that we've got to do something there. But additionally, I live in Norman, and I live in my state rep is a Democrat, and for the foreseeable future, it looks like that seat will be decided in Democrat primaries. But in Cleveland County, all my county offices are Republicans. So if I want to vote in the sheriff's if cast a meaningful vote for sheriff, I've got to be registered in the Republican primary. So I'm disenfranchised one way or the other. As a conservative, the other issue I've seen is that I think that we're starting to lose the war, even if we're winning the battles in primaries. For example, one of the issues that's really important to me is the life issue. I'm very pro-life on the issue of abortion. At least I characterize myself there. I tend to believe in three exceptions and believe that life is precious there, but kind of take that three exceptions place. But as Republicans take more stark positions on that, yes, that's what you'd have to do to win a Republican primary. But I really fear that if we had a state question to allow abortion on demand, it could pass in this state. I think we saw something similar happen on Medicaid expansion. I think we saw it happen on medical marijuana. Where because Republicans are, quote, kind of preaching to the choir, just to their base, they're not evangelizing these other conservative issues to the population as a whole. And we're going to win these individual little battles, but we're going to lose this war. And so I think that open primaries forces conservatives like me and others to explain why we're for the free market, explain why we're pro-life to a larger audience, so we don't end up losing these wars at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I want to be clear too, because some people look at this conversation about open primaries and say, well, the people who support that they don't like conservative positions. They want everyone to meet in the middle, or they want to make everything more progressive. But you're not saying that you want Republicans to adopt a more moderate position on abortion. You're saying you want Republicans who are pro-life to have an incentive to talk to people who aren't in this 3 to 5% of the population that regularly participates in primaries and primary runoff elections. They're not actually communicating why they support what they support and winning hearts and minds with the rest of the population, right?
Yeah, that's correct. In fact, I mean, you did that much better than I did. You should have a career in communications, Alex. That was really good. That's exactly right. I mean, I think we've gotten lazy, and we just talked to these few people that turn out to vote in primaries and aren't, really engaging the full population. So we never get to have those really robust debates. And in this world of social media, self-selection of information, with if we don't have an incentive to do that, it just never happens. And we're going to continue to be a divided state and divided country unless we create some sort of new market incentive to go beyond what's easy.
And I would, I'm going to opine here for a minute too. Where I see this, um, our closed primary system leading us astray, at least in terms of my personal priorities, is on education. So I have two children. One of them's in public school, and I care very much about whether my child in public school can read and write and do math at grade appropriate level. I care very much that apparently we are ranked 50th out of 50 in terms of education results, which includes, ACT scores and some of these other metrics for college and career readiness. All of that stuff's really important to me. I care if my kid is bullied at school and is happy and is thriving. The conversation that I hear right now is entirely directed at this on both sides of the aisle, I would say, at the 3 to 5% of people who regularly participate in these primaries and who are party activists. And it has a lot to do with, on one side, access to sort of like racy books, and on the other side, do we have a Bible in every classroom? And I do have a personal opinion about where I would come down if I had to choose one of those things or the other, and I don't think it would surprise anyone. But it's also very low on my list of priorities when I think about what's important in the education space and what's important in my child who goes to public schools day-to-day life.
Right. No, yeah, just to build on that, and it's a line I think you've heard me use on the campaign trail while we're doing this. I mean, we spend a lot of time in our public discourse talking about what books our kids going to have access, not if they can read those books.
Right.
And I think that is one of the things that happens because of this market share politics, the closed primary system we have.
Pat, as I said before, we're both Republicans, and so we deal with a lot of Republicans, especially sort of insiders in our world, who are like, "Why are we rocking this boat? We're in charge." And if you want to rock this boat, there has to be some sort of ulterior motive, right? Like, are we trying to get Democrats elected? What are we doing here? What do you say to skeptical Republicans, either about, your personal motivations or about the end product? I mean, how do you win these people who are our friends, over when you're talking to them?
Yeah, and I think you and I both had many personal conversations in this realm, and it's something that we're going to continue to do. Because you're right. I mean, if you're winning, why don't you just keep doing what you're doing? And I think it's because we see the product on the other side, and that what we're doing right now is unsustainable, is what I would say. We have the nation's lowest voter participation and civic engagement, and that I think is not sustainable long term. So what I would tell them is, first, it's still going to be a Republican state. It doesn't matter. We're still going to have most of our choices in November are going to be two Republican candidates. Now, it might be where I'm in Norman, I get two Democrats, but at least I'm going to have a right to say something then as a Republican. So I think but it's still going to be Republican. I don't expect it. If you look at the states who have this, the seats stay in the same party. The legislative seats stay there. In fact, I've argued with some of my Republican friends that, they were, well, we're going to risk U.S. Congress if we have a Democrat win one of these seats because of this. It's like, I think the real challenge would be, and while we have some Democrats against this, is if Republicans eventually nominate somebody that's unelectable in a general election, because that primary electorate gets so far away from the general electorate. So I do think that it's still going to be Republican. I think there's also a fundamental aspect here for Republicans that, again, 20% of our voters are registered independents now. It's the fastest growing group. It's younger voters are there. Almost half of those that are in the have served in the military, independents, and they're basically taxed, and they are paying. Primary elections are paid for by taxpayers, and so it's really taxation without representation. They don't ever, 94% of our elections are essentially decided before November, and so they never get a chance to participate. And so those are some of the first things that I come to about why I think that's just a not a valid argument there that this is a stealth way to get Democrats. So.
So there's two things I want to go into. One is talk to me a little bit about um, the experience of an independent voter, and give me some numbers on, let's say you're an independent voter, and I'll take your example for sheriff. You're trying to vote for county sheriff. What's a sort of a typical path? Because most of those elections, right, are decided before November, which means if you're an independent who cares about public safety, we're not saying you might not get to vote or you might not get even a meaningful vote. We're saying you probably won't get to cast a vote, right?
Well, yeah, you won't. You certainly won't get it. This last election cycle, you were not able to cast a meaningful vote. Political scientists use the term election of consequence, and that's the either the first election that happens or an election within 10 points. And so in Oklahoma, there was not a single election of consequence past the August runoff for sheriff anywhere in the state. Every sheriff's election, all 77 counties, was decided before November from that definition. And I think there were only six of them out of those 77 where even an independent had a chance to go cast a ballot. And in those, it was already decided. And so those elections just really didn't matter.
So your choice then as an independent voter is you show up in November and you cast a vote in a general election that's basically predetermined. It's a landslide. Everyone knows what's going to happen. Or because so many of these races are decided in the case of sheriff, Republican primaries, and they simply do not have general elections because there is not a Democrat on the ballot. So in a year where a plurality of people were saying public safety was their number one concern, a significant portion of the electorate did not get to vote for their chief public safety officer in Oklahoma, right?
That's correct. And one of the most glaring examples is in Carter County, where only two Republicans filed for the sheriff's office, and they had an exact tie in their June primary. And instead of allowing independents, Democrats, or Republicans who stayed home to have a chance to cast a vote, uh, our system says it's wiser to draw a name out of a hat. And again, I just don't think that's sustainable long term.
Gotcha. The other thing I wanted to get into is this idea of two candidates in the same party. So if Pat and I run against each other for state legislature, and there are 10 other candidates, they're Democrats, they're independents, they're libertarians, and we are the top two vote getters in a primary. This would be a strange electorate if they decided to elect us, but then we would go on to a general election, as it would be a Republican versus Republican general election. And I think that you don't see that in today's system. And so I think that throws some people off. Talk to me about why is that okay to have a
Well, I
general
mean,
election where two
I would
Democrats
say
run against each other?
one, we do actually see that today. We just don't always have the partisan labels on it. Every mayoral election in the state is done in this manner. And the last mayoral election in Oklahoma City, most of those have been just Republican candidates on those ballots. The last ones that have gone to any kind of a runoff or second round. In Tulsa, we had this time where it looks like there were two Democrats that made the finals there. And I'll tell you what happened during that runoff was those Democrats had to try to appeal to Republicans. If those were partisan elections, the Republicans would have never been heard from in Tulsa. I had done some polling there that showed the generic advantage for a Democrat for mayor was 15 points in the city of Tulsa, not Tulsa County, but the city of Tulsa. And so pretty dramatic difference there. So what I'd say is it's not that unusual for that to happen. But then you pick between the Republicans, and it's up to those candidates then to go back to what I talked about at the beginning, to build that coalition, to build that consensus of Republicans, Democrats, Independents, people that care about public safety, people that care about the economy, different issues here that don't always line up everywhere along party lines. My guess is we don't have a single listener here that would agree with every plank of either the Democrat or the Republican Party platform. But our system essentially makes you have to pick one side or the other. You can't look for candidates that might pick and choose.
Right. And whichever side you pick, the other side is incentivized to ignore you forever. If you're a Republican living in a heavily Democrat area, which actually both Pat and I are, you are not a voter of interest to whoever your elected official is. And if you're a Democrat living in a heavily Republican area, it's the same thing. You can go pound sand as far as they're concerned. So we're trying to create a system where everyone matters, regardless of whether they have a D or an R or an L or an I next to their name as a voter, at least. Pat, one of the things that is just factually true about what we're doing is a open primary, or I've heard you call it a people's primary, removes the primary election from the control of the political parties, which are private organizations that use taxpayer funds to have these elections. And it creates a new nonpartisan format, nonpartisan in the sense that the Republican Party is not in control of the primary. The Democratic Party is not in control of the primary anymore. It's just one people's primary with everyone on it. What role does that leave for the state and the county parties, both Democrat and Republican and Libertarian parties? What role do they play in an open primary world?
I'm really glad you brought this up because this is one of the things that really excites me the most about this. I've always been a party person. I became a state committeeman the year I turned 18. I was a youth delegate to the state convention, even went to the national convention in '84, able to blow up the balloons that dropped on Reagan during his his renomination. And I've always thought that the parties can be, great vehicles for good and a way to present ideas and to move things forward. But that's really gone by the wayside in the last, couple of decades. With Citizens United, that lawsuit that basically created new ways for money the lifeblood of politics, for money to get into campaigns, has circumvented the parties and their importance. And especially in Oklahoma, you've got where, generally party leaders hesitate to endorse in primaries. So by the time they engage and make an endorsement, those elections are already decided. Again, 94% of them in Oklahoma are decided before that general election. So what I would expect to happen is to have the parties become reinvigorated in this and saying, hey, there are 4 Republicans running here, but we're going to vote, we're going to caucus, we're going to put together our own system, we're going to use our own resources to tell you we like candidate A and B. We like these people. I think there's a real opportunity to make the parties matter again because I think they've really dwindled in their influence. I remember a time when there were, 25 to 30 employees at the Republican Party. I don't know what they've got now, but it's nowhere near that.
So the sort of standard journey, if I'm going back to the sheriff race again, is several people might file for the Republican nominee to be county sheriff. One of them wins. The county party, the local party can then say, we endorse our nominee, come vote for him or her. But at that point, the election's all but decided. So they haven't had a meaningful role in terms of throwing their weight around and selecting someone they think reflects their values. In an open primary system, you might have a candidate who's endorsed by, I don't know, one of these sort of special interests you alluded to, Americans for, whatever, truth and justice. But the local party could say, this is our guy. If you want to support someone who is, consistent with the values of the Cleveland County Republican Party, this is that person, and could throw their weight around earlier and make a bigger impact in the electoral process?
Yeah, I would tell you, I think candidates would seek that out. I think candidates would spend time. Right now, I think there are a lot of candidates that will go away from the party structure because they know they're not going to do anything in the primary, so it's not really relevant. I think you'd see candidates say, "Hey, I want to be able to put on my social media that I'm the officially endorsed candidate," as they go into these primaries. So I think it actually would work both ways, and I think it really has a chance to reinvigorate the party structures on both sides. I would ask, my Republican brethren to stop and think for a minute, which is the way that things should really work. Should we be using, as the Republican Party, taxpayer dollars to find out who we endorse and support, or should we do it ourselves? Should we go back to a caucus system? Should we do things that really lead to a better vetting of candidates than what we have right now? Where right now what happens is the most money wins in most of the elections.
Right. Well, I have sort of two closing questions for you to mull over, Pat. One is, are there uh, sort of other misinterpretations of the state question, or things you want to clarify to people who are learning about it? It does, the primary process, both as it exists today and sort of as we're proposing, have moving pieces, and it's making everyone understand what it is, State Question 836, and how it's changing the system has been a process. So if there's anything you want to address there, I want to hear it. And then the second one is just, let's say for a minute this effort is successful. What do Oklahoma politics look like 10 years from now? That's better, fairer, more constructive. What can we look forward to in this kind of a system?
Okay, on the first one, if someone's listened this long, I guess I'm not going to worry about it too much. I kind of always hate to restate attacks and different things here, but I think some of our opponents are throwing out a few red herrings, trying to confuse the issue here. One I think we've both heard is that going to open primaries would be like letting atheists pick who the minister is. And that's just not true. I mean, they say that, Democrats will be picking who the Republican is. No, if the Democrat wants someone in the general election, they've got to go vote for the Democrat in that first round, or else you're going to be picking from two Republicans. And so I think and then I also like to turn that a little bit. I talked about this before. Shouldn't the role of the church be to evangelize outside of its walls instead of just inside? And so that's what our current system is. Has us just doing that, preaching to the choir instead of going out and evangelizing. So to me, that's what this does. The second one is, and it's simple, it's easy, and so we get attacked for having a system like California. I will tell you, our system has more to do with the way Nebraska does their state legislative races, or the way the way Louisiana does theirs elections. And to say that we're going to California, Oklahoma by changing this is just ridiculous. I mean, the closed system like we have is used in New York, and we're no more like New York because of the way our system is. It's about values, and I think we're still going to have Republicans, and so I think those are the two things I think that are pretty easy to combat, that where the opponents tend to focus.
Well said. And so, okay, we're successful. 10 years from now, we're looking back. What can people expect about the world of Oklahoma elections and politics that's different than today?
I think there are some things that won't change. I've got polling data dating back to the 1970s. 60% of Oklahomans consider themselves to be conservatives, even though the party registrations have changed. I don't see that changing at all. We're still going to be a conservative state. So I don't think things are going to change on that level. But I do think that we'll look more like problem solvers, that will be more adaptive to new technologies, AI and others, and be better positioned to take advantage of economic changes, because I think we'll be more nimble. We'll have to be more responsive to what the economy is, what the public is thinking, rather than, digging into for a successful for those who are successful leaders, they're going to have to look at a larger breadth of an electorate and be more responsive than just reactionary, which is, I think, is what we are right now.
Well, here. Well, Pat, I appreciate you coming on the podcast today. Before I forget, I want to encourage everyone to check out voteyes836.com to get more information on this effort. We need volunteers. We need what we call ambassadors, people who can talk about this issue in their communities and on social media. Of course, we're a statewide effort that has to get 190,000 plus signatures to get on the ballot. So we're looking for financial support as well to continue this effort. But please check out voteyes836.com on the website. Check out Vote Yes 836 on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. Excuse me, on X, Facebook, on Instagram. Again, Pat's the OG and the godfather of Republican politics here in Oklahoma. We appreciate his time, and we're lucky to have him on the side of the Angels here, working for 836 and sharing his knowledge and his experience. So, Pat, thanks for being with us here today, and everyone else, thanks for tuning in and listening, and we hope to see you out there.